Today, we are going to be talking about all things labor and delivery. I'm going to be sharing my birth story with you, and I always dreamed about what it would be like to give birth. I always dreamed about what it would be like to push a child out of me, and it was crazy. It was crazy. It was not what I had imagined at all, and I will say it was more in a good way. I had a very good labor. It did not go at all like I had expected. It did not go at all like I was planning for. But I can say that I did have a good labor, and it was one of the most beautiful days of my life, as well as one of the hardest days of my life. And so I'm gonna try to share all the details with you, kind of share what happened in case it can be of any help to anyone else who's gonna be going through labor soon. Also, I just loved watching these types of videos even before I was even thinking about having children. I just find labor and delivery fascinating, and so I loved watching these videos. So if that's you, that's cool too. I'm also gonna try my best for this to be a smooth video. I am only still a few weeks postpartum, and my brain is not functioning at all near full capacity. So we're just gonna try our best here. My sister-in-laws actually asked me to share my birth story, and it was a train wreck. I couldn't remember anything. I think I was like 4 weeks postpartum at that point. I was running on like 0 sleep, and I couldn't remember like anything. I couldn't remember anything. And so after that day, I went and I wrote down as much detail as I can remember. So when I make this video, hopefully it'll make sense. You guys tell me, I don't know. Anyways, some background information before I begin like my birth story. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew that I wanted to have as much of a natural, unmedicated, limited intervention labor as possible. I was gonna give myself grace, saying how this was my first baby and I had no idea what labor was gonna be like. I was gonna give myself grace. If I needed to get an epidural, I would be open to it, but that was like last resort. And so I decided that I was gonna start preparing basically from like a few weeks into pregnancy for a natural labor. I had been reading some different, actually I wasn't really reading books. My mother-in-law got me like the What to Expect When You're Expecting book. So I was like reading through that to kind of like know what to expect reading wise, but mainly I was watching a ton of YouTube videos. One of my favorite people to watch was, I think her name's Bridget Tyler. She has like the Built to Birth course, and I could not recommend her videos more. She had like a week by week pregnancy series, which that helped me honestly like get through pregnancy. Every week I would look forward to watching that weekly video of like what was happening with my body, what was happening with my baby. Love those videos. But then also she makes a ton of videos for free, just to help you mentally prepare for birth, physically prepare for birth, all of it. It was absolutely incredible. So highly recommend those videos. And just kind of doing my own research. I was just researching, you know, the different medication options, different positions that you can labor in, pretty much literally anything. I was researching it, and it paid off. I had a ton of nurses and doctors comment on like how informed I was and how prepared I was, and it just really reassured me that all of that time that I had put into preparing was worth it. And at the end of my labor, it assured me even more that it was all worth it. And so I highly recommend that. I'm going to share throughout this video some different things that I did to help during labor, and hopefully they can help you too. So to start the story off, 37 weeks is where we're gonna start. I was 37 weeks pregnant. I was going in for my 37-week appointment, and if you know how those later appointments go in pregnancy, they're usually pretty quick. They check baby's heartbeat, they ask you how you're doing, ask you if you have any questions, kind of get you ready to like know what to expect when you're going to give birth, but you're pretty much in there for like 10 minutes and then you're out on your way. And so I had told Sam, I was like, Sam, you don't need to come to this appointment. I did have an ultrasound on this day just to make sure baby was doing okay, but she was like big, like so big at this point, and she was so low that you couldn't even really see her on the ultrasound, and so it wasn't like one of those fun ultrasound appointments. And so I told him, I was like, don't worry about coming. I did ask my sister though, because I did want someone to be there with me. So I asked her if she wanted to come with me. And she was like, I do have something going on this day, but if it's like super quick, I can go. I was like, girl, this is gonna be so quick. In and out, 5 minutes, don't even worry about it. And so she was like, all right, I'll go with you. So 37 weeks, we go into the doctor's and I go in for my ultrasound. Everything's going great. Except I did notice while she was taking measurements of baby that when she got to the stomach, she was measuring a little bit behind. And so I brought it up to the ultrasound tech, but you know, they can't really say much. But at that point, I did know that something was up. I wasn't worried that it was anything serious, but I did know just from looking at the screen and how often she was taking, like how much she was repeating the measurements, that something was going on. So I was trying not to freak out or anything, went in, met with my OB, and my OB walked in and she was like, I just reviewed your ultrasound and baby is measuring on the smaller side with her abdomen. And so she had basically told me that with the percentage that she was at, wasn't anything serious, but she would be diagnosed with, I think it's like inner uterine growth restriction. And so she told me that she would automatically get that diagnosis. And because of that, to be safe, they like to induce babies at 38 to 39 weeks when they get that diagnosis, just to make sure that, you know, they're getting the right nutrients that they need and everything stays okay. Because she said the farther along that you go in pregnancy with that diagnosis, the more that complications can arise. And so when she said the word induction, I my mind just went blank. Like I could not process anything that was going on because that was not a part of my plan. And also that was kind of terrifying to me. This is my first baby and I went in just thinking I was going in for a 5-minute appointment, and here I am finding out that I'm going to be induced. And so she told me that 30 to 39 weeks, and in my head I knew that I was turning 38 weeks the next day. So I went in on a Friday, and on that Saturday, the next day, I would be turning 38 weeks. She didn't know that, obviously, so she was like, let me look at your chart and see like what we're talking when it comes to being induced. And she was like, oh, that means like next week. And at that point I almost passed out because I heard her say it out loud, and I was like, yeah, that's next week. And so she told me, she was like, this is what we're gonna do. She said, you're gonna go and have a non-stress test, which if you don't know what a non-stress test is, they basically hook you up to some different monitors just to be able to listen to baby's heartbeat, and then they also can tell you like if you're having any type of contractions, but it's super chill. You're just lay back in a chair with a little belly band around you. She was like, you're gonna go get a non-stress test, and then after that, she's like, I'm gonna go call the hospital, see what they have for availability with the holidays coming up. And then after that, we will kind of discuss the plan a little bit farther. So I was like, okay. At this point, she left the room. My sister and I are walking down to where I'm going to be doing the non-stress test. And we're just sitting in that room laughing, because if I wasn't laughing, I was crying. I just couldn't believe what was going on. I wasn't really telling Sam anything because he was at work. He couldn't talk. I didn't want to stress him out. And I was still trying to process everything, but I did call my mom because she was wondering like how the appointment was going, and I just updated her, telling her that baby was coming next week, and we have a little surprise. So she was not really amused at first because we called her like laughing and joking with her, but it all worked out. So went in, my stress test looked great, baby was looking great. Went back in to meet with my OB, and she came in the room. She was like, all right, just got off the phone with the hospital. We're gonna be looking at before Thanksgiving. And at this point, I'm like so in shock. I couldn't even remember when Thanksgiving was. But she told me, she was like, you're gonna be going in on Tuesday. And at this point, I'm seeing stars. Like, I can barely see her clearly. Like, the world got blurry. Because mind you, it's Friday, and so Tuesday, what is that, like 5 days away? I was gonna be meeting my baby, and so I was not prepared at all. I was literally about to have a panic attack, but I'm trying to like keep it together as she's telling me all this information. She told me that she was gonna have to check me, like do a cervical check, see how dilated I was, if I was dilated at all. which that wasn't in my plan either. I did not want to have a cervical check at this appointment. I didn't want to know if I was dilated, just because I didn't want to get discouraged, because at this point I was low-key kind of miserable in this pregnancy. Like, I was ready for it to be over. And so I didn't want to hear that I had like 4 or 5 more weeks to go. So didn't want a cervical check. She told me I was gonna have to get that. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes as I talk. Told me I was gonna have to get that done. And then she was gonna tell me a little bit more about the induction process based on that. So I told her, I was like, I've heard that cervical checks really hurt. I'm a little bit nervous. And she was like, they are pretty uncomfortable, but we're gonna take our time. If we need to stop, you let me know. So I was like, okay. So I'm laying back, literally telling my sister, I'm like, this is where I die. This is my time. I can't do this. But then I reminded myself, girl, you're gonna have to push a child out of your body, and you want to do it unmedicated. You've got to get through the cervical check. This is nothing. Stop being a baby and pull yourself together. So I gave myself the pep talk, and I will say they do hurt. I'm not gonna lie. They are very uncomfortable. It took my breath away. I think I saw stars. Like, that's the type of uncomfortableness that it is. But you can do it. If you're pregnant, you can do it. I have faith in you. You're gonna get through it. So she checked me. She told me before the cervical check that I probably wouldn't be dilated at all, just because I am a first-time mom, and that's not very typical for first-time moms. But I was 1 to 2 centimeters already dilated, and she was pretty shocked. In my head, I knew I have been chugging raspberry leaf tea and doing my workouts, and so I kind of was like holding out hope, and I think that it did work for me. Some people read raspberry leaf tea doesn't work for them, but I mean, I was already starting to dilate and have my cervix soften, so I'm swearing by it at this point. But she told me that I was about 1 to 2 centimeters dilated, and because of that, I would still have to go in for cervical ripening on Tuesday night, and then on Wednesday morning they would start the induction process. So I still don't fully know what all of this means, but I was just like, okay, Tuesday, that's what I know. I'm going in Tuesday to have this baby. So she congratulated me. She was like, I'm so excited for you. Can't wait to hear all about it. You're gonna do great. I was like, thank you, as I'm trying not to cry and pass out. So that was a crazy appointment. Props to my sister for thinking she was going in for a 5-minute appointment, and then like 1.5 hours later she walks out finding out that she's about to meet her niece or nephew on that Tuesday. You're a real one. So after that, went home, started the preparation process. Told Sam my anxiety levels were at like an all-time high these next 5 days, but I was trying my best to relax, stay as calm as possible. I was still holding out hope and praying that I would go into labor naturally before Tuesday. Didn't end up happening, but I was still drinking a lot of red raspberry leaf tea. I was doing my workouts, and that ended up really helping down the road, which I will explain more later. So that was all still great that I was doing that. But Sam and I were just soaking up those last few days with it just being the two of us. I was soaking in those last few moments with my bump and just feeling those kicks and hiccups. It was very bittersweet last few days, just because I knew that this was the last time that I would be pregnant with my first baby. But also we were just so excited to meet her and so excited to be able to prepare for that. Tuesday ended up coming. I had an appointment that day at I think it was at 1 p.m. I had to go in back to see my OB, and she did another check just to see where I was at, because that again would determine if I had to go in that night or the next morning, and if I had to get certain medications to help just soften my cervix. So she ended up checking me again, and at that point I believe she said I was around 2 to 3 centimeters. And so my body had naturally progressed since Friday, which again, I was not expecting, and I was so grateful for. But because I was kind of borderline 2 to 3, she had told me that she's gonna just have me still go that night. And then when the nurses at the hospital check me, they'll be able to kind of make the decision if I need to stay that night or come back the next morning, just to see if my body would naturally progress on its own. And then Sam and I went home, and then the time came to head to the hospital. Next morning came, and that night I was sure that I was going to be going into labor naturally. And it's funny because this is my first time, like I actually didn't know what that felt like, but my stomach was cramping so much that night, and I was like, yes, this is it. My water's gonna break tonight. Like, I'm having this baby on my own. Didn't end up happening, but I will say my stomach was cramping that night, which was crazy. It was the most craziest feeling, literally, in the entire world. I was blasting my worship music on my way to the hospital, just trying to pray and remain calm and mentally just prepare myself for what was going to be happening. So we got to the hospital. I remember as we were like unpacking the bags in the parking garage, I was just like, this is such a surreal feeling right now. Like, I've been binge watching birth vlogs, and now like it's my turn. Like, now I am the people in the birth vlogs walking in to go have a baby, and it was just the most crazy feeling. I was so nervous, but I was also like, it was such an exciting like adrenaline rush feeling at the same time. So we walk into the hospital, and it honestly was like not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but we had to go up to the front desk. We had to give them like all of the information. And first of all, I cannot imagine doing that when you are in labor. Like, I can't imagine if you were having contractions and you're having to stand there and like give them your insurance card. Like, that is absolutely wild to me. So that was a blessing on like that. With me being induced, I didn't have to go through that, and we could really just take our time, and that wasn't stressful. But props to you if you've had to do that while you were having contractions. I can't imagine. But we gave them the information, and then she told me, she was like, all right, you're gonna walk down the hall, take a right, take a left, and then you'll be there. And I was like, okay. So I'm walking down, and it was so like low-key kind of embarrassing because I walk around the corner and there's just a desk with like a ton of nurses just sitting behind it, and they all just like stare at me and Sam as we turn the corner and like not really saying anything. And so I'm just standing there, and I was just like, hi, like, am I in the right spot? And they look at me, they're like, are you having a baby? And I was like, allegedly. And then they all started laughing, and they were like, all right, you can go into that room right there. And so I was like, okay. So we walk in, and the nurse tells me to put my gown on, put my belly band on, and then someone will be in shortly. Which that was funny because Sam and I could not figure out how to put the hospital gown on. They gave it to me like not already buttoned up and constructed. Like, I had to construct the hospital gown. It was so embarrassing. I had to look at the nurse, and I was like, I cannot figure out how to put this on. Can you please help me? I felt so incompetent as a first-time mom. I was so embarrassing, but she was so sweet. She helped me put the hospital gown on, and she got me hooked up to the monitors, listening to baby's heartbeat, and she basically told me that the midwife would be in, and then she would kind of explain to me how this process was going to work. So midwife ended up coming in, and she asked me if my OB had told me what was going to be happening, and she said that there was a possibility that I was going to be going home that night, depending on where I was at with the cervical check. And so she ended up checking me, and I will also say the cervical checks do get easier the more that you get them done and the more that your body is starting to dilate. Also, depending on who does it, it hurts more or less. So if that's any encouragement, if you are nervous about that, like this dog, if you are worried about that, sometimes it's not that bad. And so she ended up checking me. I was still kind of borderline, maybe around a 3, and so she had said because of that, I could stay that night and they could give me a Foley bulb to try to help my body dilate, but I was like, no way, I'm not getting that unless I absolutely need it, because I have heard that those hurt too, and I'm a baby. And so I was like, no, I'm not doing anything if I don't need to have it done. So she was like, all right, so then you can go home and you can come back in the morning at 6 a.m. and then we'll start the induction process. So I was like, okay. So we ended up going home that night. We were both a little bit discouraged, but we were just trusting that, you know, this was God's plan. And it was also a blessing that I was able to get like a good night's sleep and not have to start the labor process at night. Next morning came, Sam and I headed to the hospital around 5:30 in the morning, and we arrived there. My nurses were so incredible. They were so sweet. I just have to say, if you are a labor and delivery nurse, I mean, if you're a nurse in general, you're amazing. But if you're a labor and delivery nurse, you literally have the opportunity to like make or break someone's birth experience. And so thank you to all of the incredible labor and delivery nurses out there that just help keep you calm, help make sure that you know that like this is your labor, your birth, and they're just there for you. That's how my nurses was, and I had such a great experience, mainly because the nurses and doctors were just incredible. So thank you. If you're a labor and delivery nurse, you're absolutely amazing. So they were kind of doing our like intake information, kind of asking me what my birth preferences were, which that was also super encouraging. For some reason in my head, I just thought that like hospitals just had like one agenda, and I'm sure some are like this, but they had like one agenda. They were gonna try to like push a bunch of stuff on me, give me a bunch of medication, like do a lot of interventions. And my nurses from the beginning were like asking me what kind of birth I wanted. They were reminding me that like this was my birth. They were there for me. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that I can have the birth that I wanted. And I was like, you guys are amazing for that. Thank you so much. Because of her diagnosis, I think I had to be continually monitored, which at first I didn't want. But I ended up really enjoying being continually monitored just because I loved being able to just hear her heartbeat the whole time. I also loved being able to watch when I started having contractions on the monitor. It helped me just mentally as I was like watching the number increase and decrease, just to help me kind of get an idea of what it would be like during labor. And my doctors, I mean, my nurses were able to give me what they call like the purse. So it's basically like this little thing that you wear. It looks like a purse, that's why they call it a purse, and you're able to just plug in your monitors to that, so you can continue to be continually monitored but also move and walk around, which that was a part of my labor plan, was to be continuously moving, just to help me get through the contractions. So that was awesome. The nurses were like, we're gonna put the IV in a little bit, you just relax, wait right here. I was so nervous for the IV. I had heard that that is like one of the worst parts about labor, and I cannot do needles. I can't do needles. I can't do blood. I'm such a baby with stuff like that. And so honestly, the IV was like one of the biggest things I was worried about during labor. I was worried about the IV, I was worried about cervical checks, and I was worried about the fundal massage. Everything else I told myself I could get through, but those three things, terrified for. And so I had already gone through a cervical check, so I was able to knock that off. Next was the IV. And so Sam put a show on. We were just kind of relaxing, taking pictures, taking videos. My mom went and got us Chick-fil-A. That was absolutely amazing. And then my nurses came in, and they came in, and one of them goes, so I want to be completely honest with you because I believe in being honest. And I was like, oh boy, what is she about to tell me? She ended up telling me that there was some talk going on behind the scenes if I was going to be sent home instead of being induced. And I was like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? I was like, because you guys told me to come in last night and then sent me home. And this has already been an emotional roller coaster. Please don't send me home today. And so I was just like, okay. She was like, the midwife is going to be in a little bit to explain, but I just wanted to be honest and upfront with you guys so you're not sitting in here waiting for like an hour. So we were like, thank you so much. And so we all were like kind of starting to get a little bit worried at that point. But again, we were just trusting that God's plan was going to happen however it needed to happen. So my midwife ended up coming in, and she had basically told me that because the like, what would she call it? So like the company, not company, group, I guess, that creates the medical like rules, I guess, it just recently changed with what she was diagnosed with, like when you induce people. I probably worded that so confusingly. Basically, she was borderline on if she needed to be induced or not. And so half of the team was like, no, she got this diagnosis, her OB's been monitoring her, they sent her over to be induced just to be safe, like she's totally fine to be induced. Another half of the team was like, she doesn't need to be induced, we don't need to do anything, we need to send her home. And so basically at the end of the day, long story short, my midwife told Sam and I it was up to us on what we wanted to do. We could either wait, come back in next week and get induced, because I guess I still would need to be induced at like 39 weeks, or I could just stay today and they would just do the induction process. So this was such a hard decision for me because on one end, we had already come this far. We were all healthy, mentally and physically. I was already prepared to have the baby. And so I was like, I obviously don't want to go home. I don't want to go home and then do this again next week. But then another part of me was like, well, I don't want to rush her if she's not ready to come out yet, because obviously, like, my body was not ready to have her. I'm being induced. And so I just wanted to make sure that she was okay. And so that is what was like putting me in such a dilemma. Ultimately, Sam and I ended up just praying together, and he just reminded me that whatever happens, God is in control and she's going to be okay. And so that gave me a lot of peace of mind, and we both just made the decision to just go forward with being induced that day. The midwife and the nurses were so sweet. They were so excited for us, and they said that they would be in to do my IV. And so I had told them before that I have like a huge fear of needles, and I was so terrified for the IV. And so they were actually so awesome and just had the anesthesiologist come up and put my IV in, because he would be able to do it like one and done and have it not hurt as bad. And so I was like, thank you so much. And so I also, pro tip, if you have a fear and a problem with needles, try bringing an ice pack or putting an ice pack on your face when you have it done. It kind of just helps take your mind away from the needle and put it towards like the feeling of the cold on your skin. That is how I'm able to get through needles. And so my nurses were amazing. I went through so many ice packs during labor. I wish I counted, probably like 20 to 30, I'm not even kidding. But was able to just use an ice pack, and the anesthesiologist got the IV in. It didn't hurt going in, but I will say that was one of my least favorite parts of labor. It is so uncomfortable. They put it, I'm trying to think, like in the side of my hand, and because of my fear of needles, I did not move my hand to the point where it was swelling and turning purple. And Sam was like, you have to move your hand. Like, you cannot go through this whole labor not moving your hand. And I was like, watch me. I was like, I am not touching and moving this IV. I am not messing with it. And so I ended up just like having to like kind of move my fingers a bit so it didn't continue to turn purple. And it was so funny. They ended up putting like a wrap around it, like the same material of the baby hats that they give you. They like tore it up and tied it to my hand so I didn't have to look at the IV. It was quite comedic. A lot of the nurses and doctors laughed at me when they asked what the heck was on my hand, and I explained it to them. But listen, you got to do what you got to do to get through labor. The midwife came in and she basically explained to me that they were gonna have to ripen my cervix, because she ended up checking me. I still wasn't exactly where they wanted me to be before they would start me on Pitocin. And so they ended up giving me, I think it's misoprostol is what it's called. Basically, it's just like this little pill that they insert up there, and it just helps soften everything. So ended up giving me that. That didn't hurt at all. Just so I can help give some pain levels if you're wondering if you're about to have a baby. Didn't hurt at all. And when I got that, I had to wait 4 hours before I was able to start Pitocin. So got the pill, started for 4 hours. She did explain to me that that sometimes there are some like cramping like side effects to it that I would feel. I actually didn't really end up having anything bad, like too bad or too painful. After I had it, like maybe like 30 minutes, I started explaining to like my mom and Sam that it felt like I had to like run to the bathroom and go number 2. If you know what that feels like, if you also have had tummy issues growing up, like you would know what that feels like. That's exactly what it was like. But other than that, super minimal cramping, didn't hurt at all. And so also before that, it was so funny. I was doing like really good at this point. I was like, all right, girl, you got this. You're gonna give birth. And the nurses were like calming me down. And then that midwife came in with these stack of papers that you have to sign, basically signing your life away. They have to go through, it's just hospital policy, and basically tell you all of the bad things that could happen to you in labor. And then you have to like sign that they told you and that like you're not gonna sue them. I had to get ice. I had to get ice as she was telling me the things, because I started getting so nervous. I was like, please, why are you telling me all these things could happen to me? But like, it's hospital policy. And so I'm like trying not to pass out and throw up as I'm signing my life away on all these papers. So that was not a fun part of labor. But anyways, had the miso, and after 4 hours, I actually started to contract on my own. And so the misoprostol isn't necessarily supposed to start like give you contractions. It's just supposed to ripen your cervix. It can kickstart your labor and start your contractions, but like that's not the point of it. But that's actually what ended up happening to me. And so I was kind of moving around, I was bouncing on my ball, I was like watching the contractions, but I didn't feel a thing.
All right, how's it going?
Good. We got the medicine to ripen my cervix, and now we wait 4 hours.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You're hanging out. Look how pretty your mom is. Oh my gosh, she's so pretty.
Yeah, now we just wait, praying that it goes fast, painlessly, smoothly, and come soon. And so it was so funny because I had multiple nurses coming in and out, and they were like, hey, how are you doing? Like, are you feeling anything? And I told them, I was like, no, I don't feel anything. And they were like, wow, because like you are having pretty consistent contractions at this point, and so we just wanted to come and like make sure you are okay. And I was like, yeah, I was like, that's crazy. Like, I literally do not feel anything. And so I don't know what was causing that. I don't know if it's just like I had like a worse pain in my head, and so the pain that I was feeling wasn't even close to it. So like I didn't feel anything. I also know that I had so many people praying for me, and I specifically had them praying that I wouldn't be in pain. And for like half my labor, I wasn't in pain. And so honestly, I attribute it to the Lord. Like I have nothing else to say. It was him the whole time. I know it. But I was continuing to just have contractions, and the nurses would come in and check on me. And they basically told me that because my body was starting to have the contractions that were so close together, I think they were like 1 to 2 minutes apart, they couldn't start me on the Pitocin because you can't be having them that close. And then also having the Pitocin, I think, because it would be too much on my uterus. Like, it could cause a lot of complications. And so I was constantly having to wait to see if my body would like slow down with the contractions, but it wasn't. It was continually kind of getting into a rhythm, and then it would stop. And then the second they were going to come in to start me on the Pitocin, it would kick back up again. That happened like 3 different times. So it was a very long process of me continually like starting to get into labor and then slowing down. Because I had the purse, I was also able to like go to the bathroom, walk around. I was constantly bouncing on a ball. I was squatting, just doing whatever I could to kind of help my body speed the process up. They did continue to just check me a few times. My body was progressing on its own, which I was so thankful for, but it was still taking a little bit of time. When I found out that I was kind of having contractions and wasn't having contractions, I just texted my doula just to kind of let her know that they were starting to get consistent, but I wasn't on Pitocin yet. And she wanted to like leave to come to the hospital because she was like, sometimes people can have really fast labors and I don't want to miss anything. So I was like, that's great. Doula ended up coming. When my contractions started to kind of pick up, for me to describe the pain to you, at this point it kind of did feel like period cramps, maybe not really. More so felt like I was having tummy issues and had to run to the bathroom. Also, I was not, because so many people said it feels like period cramps times 10, I was expecting a different type of like crampy pain, and it's more like tightness. Like, contractions is literally like your uterus tightening, it's contracting. And so that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like someone's kind of like taking a band and kind of like pulling it on your stomach to where it tightens. Didn't hurt at this point, but still, like, I remember feeling them and like feeling my stomach kind of harden and just saying how like what a strange feeling it was, but moving was so helpful. So after I had been contracting for a little while, I noticed that my chest was starting to feel very tight, which was starting to make me feel a little bit worried. So I did just mention it to my nurses to be safe. They wanted to do an EKG just to make sure that like everything was looking good, and everything ended up looking good. They think that because my body was having the contractions, I was feeling it in my chest, and I wasn't really feeling the contractions, but I was feeling it in my chest, which was actually like so weird how that happened. But figured I would mention that because your body like is going through a lot of stress during labor, and I didn't realize that you could feel it in your chest. At this point, I had decided that I probably wanted to eat something. Sam was starting to get hungry, and so him and my mom decided to go get Chipotle. And I was like, I probably should eat something because once you start Pitocin, you're not allowed to eat or drink anything. They said just ice chips. And so I knew that I needed some energy to continue to get through the rest of my labor. And so I had ordered some chips and guac, and literally as Sam walked in with the Chipotle, the nurse came in and said, all right, your contractions are at a good enough pace to where we're going to start you on Pitocin. I was like, okay. It's like, rip my chips and guac, didn't get to eat them. So the nurse came in and she got the stuff for the Pitocin, and at this point I was starting to get very worried because, again, I don't do well with IVs, and I heard that Pitocin cramps hurt a lot. And so I was like kind of just starting to get a little bit nervous and anxious for what I was about to experience, because I knew that the second that the Pitocin started, things were going to get real, and the pain that I have heard people talk about was going to be coming very soon. And so I remember just explaining to the nurse, I was like, does the Pitocin hurt like when you push it through the IV? And she was like, you're not gonna feel a thing, it's okay. And really I didn't. I was able to get through it, obviously, but literally within 30 minutes I was able to start feeling the contractions. The Pitocin was starting to work. They were still manageable, but they were starting to get a little bit more intense, I guess, for lack of better words. And so I remember just like constantly having to move around. I was on the ball, I was trying to squat, I just had to be moving. One of the best things that was actually like really helpful for me was like leaning on my bed. And so I had the birth ball at the end of the bed, and then I would kind of like lean onto the bed and just kind of like move my hips, just keep my body moving, and it helped so much. I noticed that the second that I laid back on the bed and was laying on my back, the cramps were 10 times worse. Like, I heard people say that, and it is 100% true, at least for me. So my biggest suggestion, if you were trying to have an unmedicated labor and you don't have an epidural and you are allowed to move around, be moving around. Do not be on your back, because that's when it really started to hurt. The only thing that was getting hard was, at this point, I think it was like 6, 7 at night. We had literally gotten there at like 5:30 a.m. And so I was getting very exhausted. Like, my body was under a lot of stress, obviously, and I was starting to really feel the exhaustion. And that was making me a little bit nervous, because I knew that like come these next few hours is when I was really gonna have to lock in, because the pain was gonna be getting worse. And so I told them like I wanted to try to nap if I could at this point, just to kind of give my body that little bit of rest that I would need. And so my doula ended up helping me with the peanut ball. They put it between my legs. I was able to lay on my side. Definitely did feel the contractions a lot more at this point, but still manageable. And I was trying to just rest and relax as much as I could with the peanut ball. At this point, after I'd rested a little bit, the nurse came in. I believe it's every 30 minutes they up the Pitocin level. And so she came in for my second round, and she told me, she was like, all right, I'm gonna have to up the Pitocin. And at that point, when they upped it, my contractions were starting to get to the point where I kind of couldn't talk through them anymore. Notice at this point, like, I was gonna start having to kind of pull out my other forms of pain management. And so breathing was a huge one. Highly recommend. Again, Bridget Taylor did a few different videos on breathing. The way that I heard them describe it, and you may already know this, is that contractions are like a wave. And so you start to feel it, it goes up, it hit its peak, and then it comes down. And I heard someone say that contractions only last 60 seconds. And so when you know that, also mentally, it's a huge mental shift knowing that you only have 60 seconds to get through. Ice was another thing that was so helpful. I constantly had ice on my forehead, on the back of my neck. As I would feel a contraction, I would like push the ice against my face. Helped so much. I also had birthing combs, which I didn't have to use at this point, but in like an hour from this point, I did have to start using them. There's so many videos and resources kind of teaching how those work. Those were super helpful to help me get through contractions. And then worship music was a huge one. I remember there was a point where the whole room was very quiet. We turned all the lights off just so I could kind of focus. and just help kind of get myself back into like the place mentally I needed to be. Pop the worship music on. All of us were just quiet. Sam was taking a nap. We were listening to the music, and that was so huge. I remember just praying for like an hour straight, listening to worship music, asking God to just give me the strength that I needed, help me and baby to just be okay. And that in itself gave me the energy that I needed. Lastly, I will say I also did a lot of visualization. This kind of came in more towards like when I was in active labor as well, but I would close my eyes, and as I was having a contraction, if it was really painful, I would either picture a wave, like I had said, or I would picture my baby like descending lower, which may sound weird, but it actually helped me a lot, just reminding myself like every contraction that I'm feeling is helping my baby like come farther down, and was one more step to me being able to meet her. At this point, because of how painful they were starting to get, I was starting to freak out a little bit more. And fear is like your biggest enemy in labor, especially if you are having a unmedicated labor. The second you give in to fear and you start to panic and worry and have your body tense up, the pain automatically gets 10 times worse. And I can literally say that that is true. So I, again, constantly just had to remind myself the second I started to get nervous, I had to take deep breaths and I had to calm down and remind myself that if I let myself get worried and scared and tense up, the pain was going to be 10 times worse. And so fear is your biggest enemy. Please remember that if you're about to have a baby. I remember also at this point, I had just asked everyone in the room, I was like, can we please just take a second to pray? I was like, can everyone just pray with me right now? And so my doula ended up just praying over me and over my labor. And that was amazing. Literally makes me want to cry when I think about it, because it was just what I needed in that moment. At this point, I wanted to know where I was at in labor, so I knew kind of how much farther I had to go. So I had asked my nurse, I was like, can I please be checked? Like, I want to know where I'm at. And so the nurse went and got the midwife that was on call, and the midwife came in and she actually told me no, which I was shocked about. But she said it because she is a midwife and wanted to do things a little bit like limited intervention. She told me, she was like, I'd prefer not to check you if I don't have to. She was like, why do you want to get checked? Is it for pain management? And I was like, yeah, like I need to know if I can continue doing this or if I'm gonna need to get an epidural. And so she told me, she was like, can you give it like a little bit more time before I check you? If you really want to be checked, I will, but can you give it a little bit more time? And so I was like, yes. She was like, about 30 minutes, just give me 30 minutes. I think that at this point they had upped my Pitocin again. And I remember looking at my nurse and she was like, all right, I got to do it. And I looked at her and I was like, do you have to? I was like, do you really have to do it? And she was like, yes. And so I was like, all right. I was like, this is crazy. And the problem with when you are on Pitocin, your body isn't naturally giving you contractions and they are not spaced out. Pitocin is making your body contract very quickly and very close together. And it's a lot more painful. And so you don't get those natural breaks in between your contractions like you would if you were naturally in labor. And so that's what makes it very, very difficult, is that you were having like extreme levels of pain very close together. And so whenever she told me she had up my Pitocin, I was like, how can this get any worse? I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And so I was trying to make deals with her, but it didn't work. So they came in to check where I was at. And this time, I believe the doctor actually was checking me. I think I was at like a 7, maybe 7, 8. And he had told me, he asked me, he was like, basically was asking if he could break my water, but he worded it in a very professional way. And I did not put that together, as I was literally having extremely painful contractions. And so I kind of paused for a second and I was like, what do you want to do? And my doula looked at me and she was like, he wants to break your water. And I like asked her like what she thought, and she told me that once they break your water, usually like things are going to progress really quickly, and she thinks that it'll also like help me progress through the labor. And so I gave him the okay. I asked him if it hurt. I'm literally like kind of almost crying at this point, and the nurses were so sweet. They were like, no, it doesn't hurt at all. It's going to feel the same thing as a cervical check, and he's just going to put a little hook up there, pull on like your water and it's just gonna break. You're not gonna feel it. And I was like, all right. I was like, just do it. And so he ended up breaking my water. That it didn't hurt, but it was the most crazy feeling. Literally, it's just like a warm gush of water that comes out. It's low key, very relieving. It felt really nice. But I will say, the second that my water broke, within like 10 minutes, the contractions, they leveled up. They hurt a lot more. And I knew that that was going to happen because I remember as I was kind of researching different things about labor, I had heard that when your water breaks, your contractions hurt a lot more. And they were right. It hurt. All right, it's a different day, and we're gonna try to finish the story time today. So fingers crossed we are able. The pain got worse at this point. And so the way that I guess I would kind of describe it when the pain was at the level that it was at now, because I was on Pitocin, it was like contraction on top of contraction on top of contraction with like no break. Like I swear it felt like I maybe got 30 seconds after I had finished like a wave of a contraction to tell them that it hurt really bad. And then by the time that happened, as I was finishing my sentence, I had to stop and breathe because another one was right there again. And I had heard someone say on an Instagram reel that contractions feel like you are in a trash compactor. And I thought that was a great way to explain it. I guess how I would explain my contractions on Pitocin, because again, everyone's labor is different, and so this was just mine, but it 100% did feel like I was in a trash compactor. Like, it just felt like my whole body was like being tightened. Not tightened, you know what I mean? It just felt like I was being squeezed while also having to run to the bathroom with tummy issues, while also having period cramps, while also just like feeling kind of sick. Like, if you just put all of it together, that is what it feels like. Hopefully that's a good way to explain it. At this point, I believe that I was mainly laying on my side on the bed just because I was so exhausted at this point. The pain was like so difficult to even be able to like sit on my ball. So I had to just like lay down on my side to try to like get a little bit of rest in. And I was doing this for a while. The pain was super bad. And I believe that I had asked her, I'd asked my nurse if I could be checked again just so I could see where I was at. And I believe I still wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. And I had gotten super discouraged at this point. Like, at this point, I'm like, this labor is never gonna end. I cannot do this any longer. But I also remember when I was listening to people's birth stories, they had said that you reach that point in labor where you think you can't do it, and that means that you are so close. But at the same time, I was like, well, I know I'm so close and the baby's probably almost here. I really don't know how I'm gonna do this. And so I was like looking up at my nurse crying, and I told her, I was like, I can't, I think I was like at an 8 at this point, and I was like crying to her. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to know what my pain options are. Like, I think I need an epidural. Mind you, I'm at an 8 right now. I cannot sit still through contractions. I knew deep down that there was no way I was getting an epidural. Like, I was too far gone at this point, but I still was like hoping, like not hoping to get one because I knew I didn't want one, but I was just saying that I wanted one because I was like, I need something. And I think my nurse deep down knew that there was no way I was getting an epidural, but she didn't tell me that. She was a great nurse. And so she looked at me and she was like, I know that you told me before that you wanted a natural labor, and I want to do whatever I can to help make that happen for you. She was like, you still have nitrous oxide as a pain management option. She was like, would you like me to go bring that in for you? And I looked at her, I was like, yes, please. I was like, please go get it. Like, yes, I need it. And so she was like, all right, it's gonna take a few minutes for me to go get it and get everything set up. She's like, you got this. I was like, okay. So she told me to just continue doing what I was doing, continue breathing. Kept doing that, and this is where the cow noises come in. Now, if you have researched or know anything about, typically I feel like people talk about this more during like an unmedicated labor, they say to moo like a cow. And I remember when I was prepping, I was like, I will not be mooing like a cow. I have too much pride to be making cow noises in front of everyone. No. When you are at an 8 and you feel like you are in a trash compactor, you are going to moo like a cow. Maybe not, but like when I say moo like a cow, people say like literally like moo, like say moo. Mainly what they're saying is instead of having like a high-pitched scream that makes your body tense up, makes contractions hurt like 10 times worse. You're supposed to like relax your entire body and do like a low mooing groan sound. Just helps you kind of get the pain out while still relaxing your body. That's basically what they mean. I didn't moo like a cow, but I was groaning. At this point, every contraction, I was like groaning in so much pain, but it honestly was helping me. Like just getting noise out was helping me through the pain. So my sister asked me at the end of labor, she was like, did you moo like a cow? And I was like, yes, I hit that point, and I did. And I have no shame because it helped me get through labor. Finally, nurse came in with the nitrous oxide. That thing was incredible. So incredible. Now, the nitrous oxide doesn't take the pain away. It kind of just puts you in like a different mental state, kind of like takes the edge off, I guess, calms you down. Nitrous oxide is, as I think, the same thing as laughing gas, is like what they call it at the dentist. You just put like a mask on your face and you breathe it in, and it just kind of helps take the edge off, and it did. It also is probably kind of like a little bit of a placebo effect, where in my head I was saying it was helping. Maybe it wasn't really doing much, but it was helping because I thought it was helping, if that makes sense. And so I held on to this nitrous oxide for dear life. Like, this was my emotional support during labor. Every single contraction, I would grab that mask and I would pop it on my face, and I would get through the contraction like breathing in that nitrous oxide gas. And there was one point I was like in the middle of like trying to move during a contraction, and my doula was like, do you want me to hold the gas for you while like you like get in a different position? And I was like, all right. I was like, sure. So I handed it to her. The second I got up, I started to have a contraction, and she was like talking to someone in the gas, and I like had to like grab it from her. Like, I was like getting angry. I was like, give me that gas. Like, I need that gas. So if you were having unmedicated labor, definitely, if you need something else to help, highly recommend the nitrous oxide gas. That the midwife had either said like, I need to labor, like, I don't know if she had checked me or what, but she basically had checked me to know that I still had a little bit more time to go to be able to push, or wasn't quite there yet, wasn't at 10 centimeters. And so at this point, I'm like pretty much crying, and I was just saying like, I can't do this. Like, I cannot do this any longer. And that nurse was so incredible. She was like, all right, I'm gonna make you do something, and I need you to listen to me. She asked the nurse to go get the squat bar, which I don't even know this was an option, but it was pretty amazing. Basically, it was just this bar that they connect to the hospital bed, so you can literally like lean over it and be in a squatting position. And she told me, she was like, I need you to do this for me. This is gonna help you progress and help this baby come out. And so I was like, all right. So they had told me that I had to sit up for it, obviously, because I had to be in a squatting position. And I looked at her crying, and I was like, I cannot move right now. The pain is so bad. And she was like, you have to trust me. She was like, I'm going to help you up. You have to get in this position. It's going to feel so much better. It's going to help. And so they're literally like pulling me off the bed as I'm like crying in pain. But sure enough, once I was in that squatting position and was able to like kind of like, I don't know, have gravity help, it 100% helped. So I'm so happy that she forced me to get up out of bed into that position, because it was amazing. And so the rest of my labor, I was in that squatting position until they had me start pushing, which I'll get to. I think at this point, actually, my doula was telling me once I start to feel pressure, it may be time to start pushing. So while I was laboring in this position for a while, I was chewing on some ice chips. That was amazing. That helped a lot. I told my doula and my mom, I was like, okay, I think like I'm starting to feel like I'm gonna push. And so the midwife came in. I can't remember if they checked me one more time before this. I think that they did, and they had told me like I was good to start pushing. So they went out to go get the nurse and the midwife, and they came back in. They were like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like crying. I was like, hey, I think I need to start pushing. And so I can't remember like exactly what happened, but essentially they gave me the go to start pushing, which I was so excited about, because it was like, finally I can like put this pain into something. And so I didn't realize how long you could actually push for. Like, I remember hearing people share stories about how they pushed for like this many hours, or they did 5 pushes and the baby was out. For some reason, I did not think that pushing for hours was going to be something that I would be doing. I think that they said that I pushed for like 40 minutes to an hour. I could be wrong. I can't fully remember, but it was a good amount of time. And it's crazy thing is, it literally felt like 10 minutes. I don't know how that works, but it felt like 10 minutes, ended up being almost an hour, and I was shocked when they told me how long. When it came time to be able to push, I remember it being such a crazy feeling because there was so much going on around me, like so much chaos, but at the same time, my eyes were closed almost the entire time because I was trying to breathe and focus. And at the same time, I also felt so much peace. Like it literally just felt like me, God, and my baby. And I don't know how else to describe it, but it was like I could hear everything going on around me and I could feel everything going on. But at the same time, it was literally just the three of us. And I remember I was just like praying the whole time. And I was just focused on the fact that I was about to meet my baby. And I like needed to do whatever I needed to make sure I was able to get that baby here safely. My nurse was so great. She would kind of tell me, she would start counting. She'd be like, all right, we're going to count to 10. When you do, I want you to try to get like 3 good pushes in. And she would kind of help coach me how to push, how long to push, all of that. And while I was pushing, it was also so crazy because I didn't have an epidural or any type of pain management that was kind of numbing me. I was able to be so in tune with my body, which was such a crazy thing because my body was in fact on its own pushing my baby out, which I knew was like a thing. I knew that I was like should be waiting for that to happen to help decrease the chances of me tearing, to just help make sure that my baby is coming when my baby was ready to come. And so sure enough, literally the craziest thing, my body was pushing my baby out and I was able to work with my body to do that. Also at this point, like everyone that was in the room was kind of there like watching the baby as I was pushing to just kind of help coach me. And I just remember hearing them be like, oh my gosh, I see her head. Oh my goodness, she has hair. Oh my goodness, you're like almost there. You got this, you can do it. She's right there. Like it was so crazy hearing them all say that while I'm like literally fighting for my life at this point. But I had reached the point where the nurse was like, all right, baby is almost here. You have to stop pushing. We have to go get the doctor. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, I just stopped pushing? That's allowed? I was like, how am I supposed to stop pushing? My body is literally pushing my child out. She was like, I have to call the doctor. I have delivered babies before on my own, but like, I really don't want to do that. And mind you, at this point, the hospital floor was full. They had said something about there being like a special type of moon or something. There were a lot of women giving birth on the same day that I was. And I forget how many they said. I think maybe 5. I could be wrong though. Like, I'll just say 5 other women pushing the same time. Like 3 to 5 other women pushing the same time I was pushing. And there were 2 doctors, I believe, on the floor. There were also midwives, but 2 doctors, I think, trying to finagle 5 women pushing. It was chaos. And so the doctor was with someone else. So they're looking at me and they said, you gotta wait, we gotta go get the doctor. That was probably one of the most painful parts of labor, was having to not push keep my baby in when my baby was trying to come out. I remember crying. I kept on telling them, I was like, can I please push? And they were like, you have to wait. Can I please push? You have to wait. So finally, I see the doctor come in. My vision's like blurred at this point. I see the doctor come in. He's putting on his like scrubs, getting everything set up. I'm literally crying. I'm like, can I please push at this point? Finally, he was like, yes. He was like, okay, go ahead. You can push. So I am pushing at this point. They had me lay on my back. They had me get in a few different positions. I didn't really want to push on my back because that is a way that you can tear more. But at this point, I was doing whatever they were telling me to do. So they had me on my side, they had me on my back. I didn't realize how hard it actually was, like push baby out. And so they were helping me doing a bunch of different things. And literally by the time, like right before she came out, it was so crazy. The doctor was like yelling at me at this point, which I didn't really love. He was basically like kind of rushing me a little bit. But they had told me that the baby, like my baby's heart rate started to drop, which my doula said that can happen like with every baby as they're coming through the birth canal. It is normal for like their heart rate to kind of be up and down a little bit. So she thought that it wasn't necessary what my doctor was doing, and I probably could have avoided tearing altogether if she wasn't rushing me. But at the same time, like my baby's heartbeat was kind of like they were kind of losing it, and so they were it was like an urgent situation. So they ended up having to use a vacuum. My doctor was like yelling at me. He was like, you need to push, you need to push, you need to push. And I was like, I can't push. Like I'm telling them I literally have no strength in my body. I can't do it. So finally, he's yelling at me. He's telling me to push. I am pushing for my life. And then I remember them being like, we need the vacuum. And I was freaking out. I was like, what do you mean you need the vacuum? And then I hear one of the nurses go, there's no vacuum in this room. And I was like, oh my gosh. So the doctor's like yelling at them. He's like, go find me a vacuum. So they found a vacuum. Basically, it's like a suction cup that goes on the baby's head. Once you do like a push, they suction the baby's head, pull the baby out. And then I remember them saying, oh my gosh, she's here. And I was like, what? Like, I feel like I didn't even feel her come out because there was so much going on. I was being yelled at. I was crying. I was fighting for my life. And then all of a sudden I hear the words, oh my gosh, your baby's out. And I was like, praise the Lord. I remember when they said that, my head literally fell back onto the bed and I closed my eyes and I just let out the biggest sigh. And the world kind of went blank. I couldn't really tell you what happened. I feel like I wasn't really there. There was just so much adrenaline, so much that just happened. And so I remember them holding my baby up. I remember hearing her cry, which was the most beautiful thing, also the craziest thing in the world. I was just like, what the heck, I'm a mom now. Like, I just birthed the baby. What just happened? And so I remember them holding the baby up. They were telling Sam, they were like, do you want to tell her the gender? Do you want to tell her the gender? Because we waited to find out. And I remember like seeing her and him saying, it's a girl. And I remember literally just like bawling at this point. The second he said it's a girl, I start crying, lay my head down on the bed, and I just kept on saying it's a girl over and over again, if I remember correctly. They like told Sam he can cut the cord at this point, and they were like cleaning her up, and they asked me, they were like, all right, do you want her on your chest right now, or do you just need a second? And I remember telling them I need a second. And I remember a split second, I felt so much guilt saying that because people always say like, put that baby right on you the second the baby comes out. But I literally knew that if they put that baby on me in that moment, I would not be able to enjoy meeting my daughter for the first time and soaking it in as much as I would if I just took like 2 to 3 minutes just to get like my mental, I don't know how to even describe it, like my mental state back and just to be able to take a breath, because at this point I'm literally crying with so much adrenaline, feeling like I just died. And so I told them, I was like, I need a second. They took her back to get cleaned up, get her prints, weigh her, do all of that. My mom and doula went over there to go see her. I just remember them being like, oh my gosh, she has brown hair. Oh my gosh, she has those colored eyes. And then they weighed her. She weighed 5 pounds, 13 ounces. And I remember them being like, oh my gosh, she's such a peanut. And just crying like as I'm hearing all this. And so my nurse had told me, she was like, okay, so she's like, you still have to birth your placenta and we're gonna get you cleaned up. And so at this point I forgot. I was like, oh boy, I forgot I still have more stuff to do. But birthing the placenta didn't hurt at all. Honestly, it was such a relieving feeling. You just do like another like 1 to 2 pushes and then comes right out. I do remember being like, I remember looking and they kind of like didn't let me see everything just because of the way that I was laying. But I remember seeing a lot of blood and I started freaking out a little bit because I was like, I definitely have like a 4th degree tear. Like I definitely tore, and I was worried that like there were going to be some complications and something was wrong. But again, I was also reminding myself I just gave birth and that's all normal, and so not to freak out. Sam was next to me and he had asked me, he was like, do you want me to go be with her or do you need me here with you? And I remember looking at him and I was like, I need you to just stay with me. I was like, my mom's over there with her. I need you like with me to finish this, because I was so terrified to get stitched up and everything, because again, I was unmedicated, and I'm scared of needles and everything. And so he was like, all right, I'll stay with you. They had brought our baby girl over to us at this point. They had asked me if I wanted to hold her, and so I was like, yes. They put her on my chest, which was the most amazing moment in the world. And then I remember my doctor was like, all right, I'm gonna stitch you up at this point. And I was like, okay. He goes, I'm gonna numb you. So if you don't know how this all works if you're unmedicated, I'm gonna tell you. So he was like, I'm gonna numb you. And I remember him holding up the needle. And I looked at the needle, and in my head I went, he's gonna stitch me up down there. And he's holding up a very large needle. I think there's only one place that needle goes. Yeah. If you're thinking what I was thinking, you're correct. I was very terrified, but I was like, girl, I was like, you got it. Like, there's nothing you can do right now. Thankfully, it did not hurt that bad because I was holding my baby. I had just gone through labor, so like anything else was a breeze. But that they do in fact give you a little needle down there to numb everything. And so I also remember seeing the hook that he was going to use to stitch me up, and I was just like, Lord, be with me, please. So he's stitching me up, and I remember I still felt it. And so I told him, I was like, I don't think the numbing worked like in this certain spot. Like I still feel it. And I remember him looking at me and him going, you still feel it? And I was like, yeah, but like he couldn't do anything. So I think he was just like talking to me to help calm me down or something, because he was like going quick to like get it done. And then I remember he was like, all right, you're all set. And I was like, all right. He didn't tell me how much I tore. So I had no clue what kind of degree tear I had. Not until actually like 3 days after birth. I didn't find out until like 3 days after birth, because there was so much going on. They didn't have time to put it in my chart. So none of the nurses knew. It was rough. And then the nurse had told me I still had to have an hour of Pitocin just to help with the bleeding and everything. But I was just going to lay down and rest. And then in 2 hours, the recovery nurse, I think they call the recovery nurse, I don't know, whatever nurse is going to come in to help me bring me to like the postpartum room that we were going to be staying in for the next few days. So she told us to rest. And then they all left, and it was just me, Sam, my baby, and my mom, because my doula had left at this point because it was Thanksgiving Day. And I was like, you go home, you go rest, you go be with your family. She was absolutely amazing.
It's been a minute. Do you have an update?
Yeah, I had a baby.
So cutie like her mama.
At this point, I think it was 5 in the morning. Yeah, it was 5 in the morning, because 7 o'clock is when the other nurse came in. So my daughter was born at like 4 something in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, and we just decided to rest for those 2 hours. My mom held the baby. Sam and I took some naps. And then at this point, the recovery nurse came in at 7. That was crazy. I thought that you got some time after you give labor to like fully rest. No. Within 2 hours, almost on the dot, that recovery nurse was in. She was getting me out of bed. I was so mad. I stayed really good at not being mad during my labor, but that recovery nurse, she literally came in, and mind you, I was pretty much on my feet doing like through labor unmedicated, and so I was exhausted. I remember the first time I stood up, I did not know that this is what postpartum was gonna be like, and postpartum ended up being so much harder than I thought that it would be. Maybe I was naive, but it was extremely hard, and physically very hard. I couldn't get myself out of bed. I couldn't sit up. She had to literally like pick me up to even sit up, and everything on the inside feels all out of place. It's the strangest feeling. And she was literally like making me walk to go to the bathroom, and I could not walk. Like I remember, and I feel like I thought she kind of like, I feel like I felt a little bit judged, because she was like, why is this girl like barely able to walk? It was so bad. I feel like I could make like a whole separate video on just like postpartum, but yeah, that was terrible. So much more I could say, but I'm just gonna say that nurse was not good. So anyways, had me get up, had me like, they wheeled us out in a wheelchair, put us in the postpartum room, and then the rest of that is a whole different story. So if you want to hear about postpartum and everything like that, I can totally make another video, but this video is already too long, so I'm not going to talk about all of that. But anyways, that is my birth story. That was a lot. Hopefully it all made sense. But yes, gave birth to a beautiful baby girl on Thanksgiving Day. Her name, I believe I said her name at the beginning, but her name was Eliza May, and I actually asked on YouTube if anyone had any like questions that they wanted me to answer, and I did have 2. Oh my gosh, wait, I just forgot. Before I talk about that, I had said at the beginning that I was scared of like 3 parts of labor, then the fundal massage. I didn't even talk about the fundal massage. Okay, let me just talk about that for like a minute or 2. So after I had her, they have to do the fundal massage, which basically they just have to push on your uterus. If you don't know how like that all works, when you're pregnant, your uterus obviously grows. I think it's like to like the size of like a blown up balloon. And basically when the baby's out, they have to push on it to help it shrink back down. It takes a very long time to shrink back down to its normal size, but they have to push on it, and also have to push to make sure that like you don't bleed. Now, I have read that the fundal massage is not always necessary. I think in the hospital they do it just for protocol reasons. They like have to do it to you, but people say like it hurts and it's the worst part of labor. So I was terrified of it, and it didn't hurt as bad as I thought that it would hurt. Maybe because I had just gone through labor, and so like again, my pain level like scale was a little bit different, but it does in fact hurt. Like I remember they were doing it and I was having to like groan through that. And I remember I was like crying and like wincing in pain as they were doing it, but it was not as bad as I had heard people say on Instagram. So if you are pregnant and you hear about the bundle massage on Instagram, at least for me, it wasn't that bad. And they only had to do it like 3 times, I think, which was good. So anyways, had to talk about that. Definitely does hurt though, but in the Instagram reels, they're like running and like pounding their fist on you. That is not what it's like. That's a little bit over dramatic. They just really just stand there and they just push on your stomach. So anyways, had to talk about that because that was a big thing that I was scared of. Someone had asked me how we came up with her name. So I'll talk about that and I'll answer the one other question and then we'll be done. Her name. Naming a baby is hard. It is very, very hard. I mean, some people come up with like a baby name when they're 12 and that is in fact what they name their kid, and they know without a shadow of a doubt that is their kid's name. That was not Sam and I. We had a very hard time agreeing on names. And so throughout the whole pregnancy, we had, I think maybe 1 or 2 that like we could agree on for each gender. And we couldn't talk about it all throughout pregnancy. We kept on saying like, we just have to wait till the baby's here to have this conversation, which we did. And so I remember when Sam told me it was a girl, in my head, I said Eliza May, but I didn't say that out loud because we had other people there. And I wanted to make sure that was a conversation only Sam and I had together in case he didn't like it. But the second they said it was a girl, in my head, I said, her name's Eliza May. We get brought into our postpartum room and it's just Sam and I, and we literally didn't even really talk about names for the first like few hours. I feel like neither one of us like wanted to bring it up. We just kept on like calling her baby. And then finally we were like, all right, we're gonna have visitors in like a few hours because my family was gonna come see her. And I was like, we gotta have a name. Like I want to be able to have a name before we text people that our baby's here. And so we were just like staring at each other. We were staring at our baby. And we were like, what are we gonna name her? And funny story, she actually had a different name for like 2 hours of her life. We were calling her a different name, which I'm not gonna say what that name is because we still love it and we may use it for if we have another girl. But yeah, she had a completely different name. Finally, I asked him, I was like, all right, are you set on this name? And he was like, no, I don't think so anymore. And I was like, all right. I was like, we just got to pick a name at this point. And so finally we decided Eliza May Rivers. Eliza we got from, I actually think that was just a name that Sam had just said one day. He was like, what about Eliza? And I was like, wait, I actually love that. And so throughout the first half of my pregnancy, I was like, okay, if we have a girl, it's Eliza. And then I ended up hitting a point where I was like, I don't know if I love it anymore. I don't think I want it to be Eliza. Didn't think about it for a while. And then sure enough, came back to it. Eliza means pledge to God, which that meant a lot to us. Of course, whenever we would pray for our baby, we would always pray, for our baby to just be healthy. And we always just told God that, if you bless us with children, we're going to do whatever we can to raise them to love and to serve you. May is actually my sister's middle name. So we named her May after my sister. So Eliza May Rivers, that's how we got her name. And then the other question was, how was her first Christmas? So we're kind of shifting gears here, but her first Christmas was amazing. So fun to be able to be parents like for Christmas. I know that's something that I had always dreamed of, is like bringing the magic back to Christmas, I guess, like once you have kids. And she was only a few weeks old, so obviously she wasn't able to like understand anything about that day, but it was so fun for Sam and I to just be able to like get her Christmas jammies and buy her like a few little Christmas gifts and just enjoy that time with the 3 of us for our family's first Christmas. So it was absolutely amazing. Her first Christmas was awesome. Took so many pictures and videos, and I can't wait for her to be able to watch them when she's older. But anyways, those are the 2 questions. That is end of story time. This video is probably an hour long. I apologize if you've made it to the end. Thank you so much. You're great. But yeah, if there's any other type of like pregnancy video you would like me to make and talk about, I'm 100% down. You let me know. I have a few ideas of some things that I do want to do, so we'll see if I end up doing that. But definitely just comment on this video or whatever you want to do to let me know. But anyways, that is all. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next video.